Okay, welcome to chapter 4 of Who Are the Brothers Grimm? This is called A Grimm Time. After living in Paris for 10 months, Jacob returned to Castle, where William, their mother, and their siblings were living. William studied for his final exams at the university, and Jacob found a job as a clerk at the state's War Office. War was coming. Napoleon Bonaparte was the Emperor of France. It was 1805, and Napoleon had taken control of Italy, Austria, Egypt, and Turkey. Now he was coming for Germany. On November 1st, 1806, French soldiers seized Castle, and the German noblemen fled. The brothers' aunt, who had brought them to Castle for school, left too. Almost overnight, the entire town changed. French, not German, was now the language spoken in Castle. Life became very difficult for Jacob and William. Their home was occupied by foreigners, and their favorite aunt no longer lived nearby. The brothers felt very alone. Jacob quit his job, and William could not find work. To take their minds off their troubles, William and Jacob concentrated more and more on collecting German fairy tales. They scoured libraries and bookshops for fairy tales, but they had little luck finding any. Then, in May 1808, Dorothea Grimm suddenly died. She had been the center of family life. It was her love and support that had created such a close and happy home. The brothers had lost their jobs. Now they had lost their mother, too. This was the most difficult time for the Grimm family. Lot ironed clothes, neighbors shared their food, and Jacob and William helped with the housework. Still, they only ate one meal a day. Things began to improve when their younger brother Ludwig found work. He became an illustrator for a literary journal that Arnim and Brentano edited. Then, in July, King Jerome, Napoleon's brother, who now ruled Kassel, hired Jacob to run the palace library. Yay! There were 12,000 books in the library. However, no one but the king, queen, and librarian were allowed to read them. That wasn't fair. Still, it was the perfect job for Jacob. He spent his days reading and studying, and he was paid to do it. William was in poor health and seemed to get worse each day. He would lose his breath after climbing a few steps. His heartbeat was very irregular. It would beat very quickly before returning to normal. Sometimes this would continue for almost a whole day. Getting good care was hard. In 1809, William traveled 60 miles to see a doctor in Halle. When he wasn't being treated or resting, William looked through all the books in the library in Halle for fairy tales. William found some folk songs, but very few fairy tales. The brothers' collection was off to a slow start. Finally, after 6 months, William began to feel better, so much that he accepted Arnim's invitation to visit him in Berlin. There, Arnim introduced him to many writers and artists who inspired William to contribute to the world beyond his small hometown. This trip was to William what Paris had been to Jacob. It opened his eyes to a larger world. In December 1809, William returned home to Castle. With French secret police roaming the city, Jacob and William retreated to their study. They studied German history and literature that was written hundreds of years earlier. Many of the books they wanted to read were in old and foreign languages, but Jacob and William were not bothered by this. They simply taught themselves to read over 10 languages, both ancient and modern, and they did all of this without language guides or textbooks. Of all the literature they read, Jacob and William loved reading fairy tales the best. Many smart people thought fairy tales were simple and childish. The Grimms, however, believed that fairy tales were hidden treasures of German cultures and values. The brothers wanted to remind people what it meant to be German, even while under French rule and especially during a wartime. The thought of saving German fairy tales was the way to do it. But if fairy tales weren't in bookstores and libraries, where could the brothers find them? Chapter 5 is called Collecting Fairy Tales, and that will be tomorrow.